Manchester United's squad isn't great. So today I'm joined by JJ Bull and Laurie Whitwell to talk about what it could look like in 2 years' time. JJ, how do you start thinking about this one?
Well, I started thinking about what they should look like in 2 years' time. And what I think they should look like in 2 years' time is a team full of elite level players in their prime, players with something to prove who are hungry. You want hunger. Players that suit the tactical system, and also players that complement each other, and players that could work under another manager, because you never know with Man United. But also you want players who connect with the fans and the club. That's really important. But the tactical stuff's really important. Players who fit the system. We have to look at what the system is and what they want to get from that. And what we know of Ruben Amorim is that the team's probably going to look something like this. These are not player names, these are positions, you see. So this is what we know he wants to play, is this 3-4-3 everyone talks about, which normally becomes a 3-2-5 basically, because these are very attacking players. But these are the sorts of positions you need to fill, and the characteristics of each player will eventually change how this actually looks, because obviously players change that. But we can look at what they definitely won't look like in 2 years based on what this is. And what it probably won't look like is what we saw against Ipswich, because what we see is this horseshoeing across the back. This is the passing network against Ipswich. This is not ideal. This is not what you want to happen. But there are two key players, especially within the system, that are the really most important ones probably are the wing backs, these guys here. And what you'll see from this system is that these ones are up and down constantly. They provide most of the width, or maybe all the width in certain games you'll get, but they'll get lots of assists to each other, lots of goals from each other. They're really important. But we also need to look at what happens when you push wing backs up and what you're thinking about off the ball. Because it's all well and good attacking with your wing backs, but you have to think of your rest defence and what happens when the ball turns over, because you can't always be positive. If you lose the ball like this, they can turn over. You can see where the gaps kind of will be when you push them up, because Eriksen and Casemiro are not very athletic, they're not able to cover the distances. So if you're able to then counter into these positions, these have to be mobile to get across to cover both sides of this. Then you want centre-backs who can push out and get tight to people. But you'll see like Mazraoui is quite good in this position because he's a right back really who can play as a centre-back, so you've got somebody who can play like in this position quite well. There's certain parts of this team where they're kind of well stacked.
I thought he had a decent game against Ipswich.
Yeah, I thought so too, yeah. But then when you push them up, you'll see this is where the problem is, because then if you push everyone up, you've also got to be really fast in behind. So if they want to attack you and you're not pressing up really high, De Ligt's not very fast, teams can easily get at you. There's a midfield with no real aggression or athleticism that's too easy to overrun. And this is what you need to have. So like everything that Ruben Amorim wants to do is like how to create chances with your wing backs, but then also how do you defend that way, and it's all aggressive. And at the moment it doesn't really have players, I think, that suit the aggressiveness of the press to fix it.
Okay, what about on the ball?
Well, on the ball is very important, especially how you build up from the back. And we see what they might need as well, also, and how they're going to progress the ball. So what Ipswich did, and lots of teams will do this now against 3-4-3, we saw Arsenal do something not dissimilar when they just destroyed Sporting in the Champions League, is that if they're playing a back three, the other team will sit off in a three. Part of the reason you play a back three is if a team is pressing with a 2 or a 3, you can stretch them out, so you create passing lanes for yourself to pass through. So what we saw with Man United is they're playing in a back three like this, and if you've got De Ligt here, he's got 2 safe options, everyone else is kind of man-marked, can't really play through. What you could do is try and play one of these balls out to the wing backs, but if you do that, the way Ipswich and other teams will be set up is that the full backs will immediately jump onto them, and then they're locked in and the ball has to go backwards anyway. That's a trigger. The other team could push you up and squeeze you back towards your own goal. That's not ideal. So perhaps what they could then do is try and thread a pass through to Eriksen, who should move into the space between this block. If they can get in between them, you can fire that ball in there, which would then trigger the sort of bounce pass into the midfielder who's got his back turned to him to then play forward. That kind of up, back and through a lot of teams do. One option, kind of hard to play through that block, really dangerous because you're leaving yourself vulnerable if it doesn't make it. And then the other thing you could do is punt it long to someone up top. You can't do that if you're playing Marcus Rashford up top. So there's lots of profiles of players that they're missing. What you definitely need are centre-backs who can carry the ball into space. Because if a team sits off of you, which they'll often do in this sort of shape, because you're playing a back three, you need to run into the space to use it. And so you need players like Mazraoui who can do that. Evans is not going to be the best at this. So you want ball-playing defenders. They have like Ousmane Diomande, who's playing at Sporting, really good at that sort of thing. Players on the other side as well, whose names I have forgotten. But when you move with the ball like this, it doesn't mean that you can just then carry the ball forward and pass it to someone else. What happens is that other teams will then, other players will adjust their pressing positions to come across, try and stop you. So if Hutchison here, number 20, comes across, that will of course free up Eriksen in the middle, and then other players will come across, will free up other passes in the middle. So everything you're doing will have a knock-on effect.
A domino effect, JJ.
That's exactly what I mean, Joe. But also the defenders not only have to be good on the ball, they also have to be very aggressive off of it. and jump up with this high pressure. Now, we've seen other people talk about this recently, we'll just do it very quickly. Johnny Evans, and Amorim talked about this after the game, should have been tight to Hutchison all the time. So you think it's a back three or a back five, but really it's just a man-to-man marking system out of possession. So you want pressure high up, which Man United have. You've got Casemiro really out of his comfort zone. You've got Eriksen really out of his comfort zone. They should be tighter. Ipswich can play through. If you're not really committed to what you're doing in the press, if you're not aggressive enough, if you're not first on it, they can play through. You've got to be really good at it. Evans comes up, but isn't quick enough. And what you see is someone good like Hutchison can just spin him like that. A really great first touch, goes round him, and then suddenly Ipswich have an attack. And then you see again, De Ligt should be tight to Delap here. So it's all about being like front-footed defending, not passive, not sitting back, waiting. United for a long time have been sitting back, waiting for teams to come to them and then going over the top. But Amorim's talked about why this is so far already. They just don't know what they have to do, so they're not confident in it. And if you're not confident jumping on someone running 30, 40 yards up the pitch, because you're a defender, then you don't want to do that. You want to sit back and defend, which is why they were so passive against Ipswich. But in 2 years' time, they won't be.
Yes, thank you there, JJ. Now, you mentioned in there that Amorim hasn't had many training sessions with the team yet. I know that you were at open training today, though, Laurie. What did you observe there with your keen tactical eye?
Well, obviously lots, because I am that way inclined and so sharp to the detail. Yeah, there was lots of rondos. That's you don't actually get that many. That much insight into training when it's this kind of thing. It's a UEFA obligation that they do. But it was interesting nonetheless. You saw, smiles, which I think they are perhaps aware of the cameras and they want to make sure that people, think they're very happy with the new coaching setup. But I think it was interesting actually. You've got Ruben Amorim there. He's the head coach clearly, but he's brought a lot of staff with him. He's got 6 other members of Sporting's team that he's brought across with him, and how they delineate their roles is kind of interesting, because you've got Carlos Fernandez, who's the 30-year-old. He only turned 30 on Thursday. He's the number 2, so he's kind of telling these players what he's going to do next in the different sessions. The rondos are set up. There's 2 different groups. They're passing the ball around between themselves. You've got Emmanuel Ferrer, who's in his mid-40s. He's on one group. Adelio Candido, he's 28 and he's leading the other group. So it's going to be interesting when, if results don't go the way they want, how's that relationship going to be? Are they going to have the authority to kind of tell a player, Casemiro's 4 years older than him, to do what he wants him to do. And then you also had Paulo Barrera, the fitness coach. He was actually next to Ruben Amorim for most of the session, kind of talking to him. And I think clearly that's an interesting role that he's got, because he's spoken about the athleticism in the squad that he wants improving.
Interesting you talk about the fitness coach. I feel like Manchester United have had a lot of injuries over the last year or two. Is that something that they're keenly trying to resolve? Is it resolvable?
Well, this is it, the big question. I mean, Erik ten Hag, if he had hair, he would have been tearing it out, and the number of injuries that they were picking up. Some people might have pointed a finger at Erik ten Hag and his sessions that he put on, about those kind of muscle injuries that were coming up. He would say that he needs to have robust sessions so that you are prepared for the Premier League. It's a hard league. You need to train hard. But clearly Amorim has come in with an agenda to sort of reshape that. He wants players that are athletic, as JJ's saying there, to get up and down the pitch, to do those springs into opposition players and get possession in a quicker way. So they're looking at it. They brought a new doctor in at the start of last season, although it wasn't as quick as Erik ten Hag would have liked. It was only in the September. Gary O'Driscoll from Arsenal. They basically made them wait until they had a replacement ready, and then they allowed him to go to Manchester United. Ten Hag would have wanted him at the start of pre-season. So they're kind of catching up a little bit still from that. They've been investigating it. I don't think they know the ultimate causes for everything. Clearly, players have got to take some responsibility as well, in the rehab and everything like that. But it is interesting that for Ruben Amorim's first training session back, I'm not saying this is a coincidence as such, maybe it is, but you had Lenny Yoro in the team in the practice session. You had Luke Shaw, you had Mason Mount, you had Tyrone Malacia, who's been out for like 18 months. So it's a strange sort of circumstance that he's actually got a bigger squad than I think Ten Hag left when he departed.
Interesting coalescing of factors there.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you talked us a little bit through the team before, and just before we get on to the squad audit itself, injuries have kind of impacted that lineup as well. We're talking about Johnny Evans playing a wide centre-back, and Eriksen, who's an example of a player who might not start every game. I read that the reason was that some of these players hadn't returned from international duty in time, and that Amorim picked players that he'd had for longer to train with. Because I guess the point here is that he just doesn't have much time with the players, does he?
Well, yeah, I mean, your whole training schedule will be influenced by the games you play, the players that are available, and outstanding factors like them getting injured randomly or coming back from international duty, things like that. Now, if you're putting your training schedule together, you also want to make sure that the The training sessions you put in have fitness within them, so it's like part of, I guess you'd call it tactical periodization, but everything you do is with the ball, but it's still fitness based. You'll do drills that are related to how you get these players fit to play your exact system.
They must eat 5 fruit and vegetables a day, is that?
That's one of the main things. There's that, there's sleep well, and love each other.
Yeah, I would say that, you were in jest, but I expect it's important.
It's one of the most important things. The other most important thing is the training schedule. And I've built one for Man United to show you how difficult it is to train a new team and a new tactical system all at once. Now, this is Ruben Amorim's exact Google Calendar that he's done. So as you see, the players arrive on training on Monday. But this is based on, they've got a match day on Saturday, and a match day plus one is what you call it, is the Sunday, and they'll have a recovery and rest session. They might even just have a day off, the day after a game, but normally there's a bit of recovery, something like that. So this is what a normal week would look like. You come in at 9, do a bit of a, hello, how you doing? Then you have a warm-up, or a thing called activation, which you do as part of your training sessions. Then your first session of the week is defensive structure, for example, just to make sure you correct some things from the previous game. Then you have lunch all together. You've got to have lunch all together. And then you have a recovery or a light gym session in the evening, just something like that. And then the next day, another session, attacking principles, something like that. Then some physical conditioning, doing your gym work, trying to get fitter, stronger, better. Next day, Wednesday, another session, wherever you want, tactical integration, wherever you want. Then some video analysis, very important. Then the next day, you've got 11v11 practice all the things you've learned during the week, and you apply them in the big game setting with the opponent set up. So you've got a bit of a shadow play thing going on. Then some individual work if you want it. The next day, this is a perfect week for footballers. Then you've got some light tactics, maybe some set pieces. Also, about 30% of your goals now. You've got to spend some time on that. Then your team meeting, preparation, then your match day. That's what you've got. And then it starts all over again. However, when you have a fixture list that looks like this, when you have a game every 3 days, suddenly everything changes. And then my next slide is also his Google Calendar, but it's assuming he's got a game on a Saturday, Wednesday, and a Saturday. So what Amorim's going to have to deal with is that he's played on a Saturday, Sunday's your rest day, then Monday you have a normal session, and you've got a recovery, light gym session in the evening, but then you've got to travel, because you're going to play a game abroad somewhere, let's say, pick a country.
Romania.
Yes, so Romania. So they fly to Romania in the morning. So they travel there, with a bit of rest, get used to where they are. Then they have a light session in the stadium in the evening.
Because it would take a while to get to Romania.
You've got to fly there. You can't walk. You could try.
Swim?
You can swim, yeah. All 3.
That would be the training and the travel together. It's actually quite smart.
Good fitness session. With a ball, though.
Yeah.
They're not underwater on the pitch.
Well, yeah. Some of them are.
Then you have your team meeting. The next day, it's match day. Then you travel after that, straight after night. Normally they go at night, don't they? Straight after the game?
Although they stayed in Turkey after Fenerbahce.
And then, as you can see, it's what happens then after that is lighter training sessions. You can't go with the same energy really because you want to reserve your energy because you've got another match day coming up on Saturday. So again, it's repeats. So suddenly you only have one real training session really. Maybe you still have a bit of video analysis, but you can't go as hard. You can't do an 11v11. You can't do as much as you want because you're trying to save energy because you've got so many games. So how do you get your messages across in time? How do you improve the players to make them better for 2 years' time?
Thrilling insights there from JJ Bull. Now let's audit this Manchester United squad because I think that there are a number of players that at least some fans of the team might think shouldn't be there in 2 years' time. And let me tell you, Laurie Whitwell, we have the fans' voices here on the show today. Not literally because that would be awful, but we did ask fans of the Athletics Manchester United WhatsApp group to fill out a poll for us with the answers as to whether they thought that each individual squad member should still be here in 2 years or not. And we're going to use that information as we talk about it today. You can join the WhatsApp group, by the way, and you should. There's a QR code on the screen. The first 2 players I'd like to come to, I've grouped them together, Laurie, is Diogo Dalot and Luke Shaw. 2 players who I suppose in Amorim's system could play in 2 different systems, 2 players of slightly different ages. What are your expectations, do you think, about those 2 players? Do you think in 2 years' time, 26-27 season, both of them are still there, one of them's still there?
I think Diogo Dalot will still be there because he is a very eager player to take on information. He's already spoken about Ruben Amorim's impact and has said specifically that the instructions have been clear and simple, which I don't know whether that was a deliberate sort of contrast to what the kind of perceiving wisdom about Ten Hag's communication was like, or whether it's just him speaking honestly. But I thought that was interesting.
Speaking in Portuguese, maybe.
But that actually is a very good point. Yes, maybe that was it. Easy to understand in your native tongue.
Yeah.
But he was. I think he's a player that can, as you say, play in different positions. very eager. I mean, he played left wing back at Portman Road. We thought maybe he was going to play right centre back in that match actually, or even right wing back. So he's clearly got multiple ways that he can fit into this side. Luke Shaw is a different case. I feel like his injury record, he just hasn't had a consistent run of football, since he's had the leg break, which is obviously very unfortunate for him. I do think that has impacted the muscle injuries that he's picked up on previously. And yeah, he's obviously only just back from February, I think it was, the last club game that he played for Manchester United. Obviously, he played at the Euros as well, but it's been a long time out. So I wonder if they feel like they need to move on from him, as technically gifted as he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say you're in line with the majority of the supporters here. 70% of people think that Diogo Dalot should be there in 2 seasons' time. Only 30% think that Luke Shaw will be. I mean, we can read into that perhaps that they might think he's too old by that point. 2 years is a long time. But we said with Laurie, JJ, that both these players can probably play in 2 different positions in Amorim's system, right? Does that change the nature of whether they will still be there or not? Does that make them more valuable as squad members?
As squad players, probably, yeah. But what you want from Man United in 2 years is to have players who are in their peak, so absolute prime level players. And I wonder whether Shaw's going to be there. Shaw's probably going to be useful to have as an experienced player who's going to help other ones out. Because, like we're saying, the wing backs are so important. They give you all the width. They're really important for your attacking width. They're important for just everything you want to do on the pitch. And so if you have Dalot and then you play him at left wing back, suddenly you've got him trying to come inside on his right foot. So you lose a lot of what you get from a left-footed crosser on that side. Shaw, a good wide centre back, but I think United's back 3 actually looks okay for the next few years.
Yeah, I wonder if in some ways it's a bit fortuitous for Shaw that a back 3 system is being implemented here, because the athletic expectations of him from the wing back role might be a bit potentially beyond him given his injury record. But we've seen him play as a wide centre-back in the back 3 before, and he's been pretty good.
Well, it helps having a player who can play this sort of elbow-back role. So if this one pushes up and you've got a left centre-back here who can play left-back, suddenly you can shift and your shape changes.
You become the elbow.
Yeah, because the Amorim's system uses the goalkeeper quite a lot, so that kind of becomes your back 3 really, and they can push them all wide, and there's loads of different variations you can have on it. Shaw would play here, I think, more likely, because I don't think he's got it in him anymore to really do the left wing attacking stuff. He can do it, but I think expect him to do it 38 games a season or even 30 in the league is unrealistic. And so that's going to be a focus. I think most people would know that's probably what's going to happen, is getting someone in at left wing back.
Okay, so we got a yes on Dalot, a no on Shaw from Laurie. Official verdict?
I think they'll both be there. Shaw for keeping experience and just a little bit of know-how of the club, even if the know-how of the club over the last few years has been losing.
Okay, moving on to the next. I've grouped 2 more players. I've grouped them all into 2.
Love this.
I'm good at grouping. Now,
Noah's Ark.
These 2 players, Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes. You can see the group midfielders. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to ruin the surprise a little bit and tell you, I was a little surprised to see that the WhatsApp group fans, remember them that I told you about before? 75% of them think that Mason Mount should be there in 2 years, which was quite a high number. I was surprised to see that. Having said that, Ruben Amorim, since arriving, has spoken very kindly of Mason Mount in the media. I wonder if that had an impact, maybe. Yeah,
possibly. I think clearly the fans are eager to hear from Ruben Amorim and want to take on board everything that he's saying. I think they're very keen as a fan base to get behind this new guy. And yeah, I think Mason Mount does fit into a few different roles actually for him. I think it was interesting him saying that before the game, and then he didn't actually start him, and he only brought him on very late in the game, even after other substitutes where he thought he could have actually made an impact in the game. So perhaps he was sort of softening the blow that was inevitably coming, although he has also said he's going to rotate his team a lot. So I imagine Mason Mount will get plenty of opportunities in the coming weeks. But yeah, he came on as that sort of number 10 role, one of the 2 behind. You can see the similarities there that he can produce. Technical play in tight space, I think that's what he's been really good at, and pressing high as well. He's really eager out of possession. I think that's something that Amorim can harness. But also maybe he's one of the 2 deeper players, sort of number 8s, that kind of up and down player that he wants in those 2 positions there. One's kind of like a ball winner, and then one wants more athleticism from. But I think he played in this system, didn't he, for Chelsea when they won the Champions League, and he was actually one of the front 3. So I guess that's where the number 10 role sort of maps onto it, but maybe you can even push on higher than that.
I mean, would you be that surprised if in 2 years he was a key part of the team?
No, I agree with Laurie as well. I think Mount can end up playing one of the midfielder roles. I think he kind of suits that, and oftentimes at Sporting he would play attacking players in that kind of midfield role, because then you get better options when you're going forward, maybe against weaker teams. But the problem in the Premier League is there are no weak teams, except for Southampton. But that's where he could maybe play wide forward position. I think one of the problems maybe come onto, and these two players linked there, is that when you bracket them, but they are all in the same sort of area. So if you put Fernandes there, you also you put Mount into that area. I think this is where Fernandes should play, is in this system. I think he'd be much more dangerous there. Otherwise, he keeps dropping in to try and get on the ball in different positions, which is not ideal. But that's also probably where Garnacho is going to be best. And it's also probably where... You see where I'm going with this? Where's he gone?
Rashford.
Yeah, he's probably there as well. Anyone else you want to put in there? They'd all be good there.
I mean, Xerxes?
Yeah. I would play Xerxes either here or here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me neatly onto Fernandes, for whom I think the question is slightly different, Laurie, because Fernandes is a little older. In 2 years' time, he'll be 32 years old, I think, so he'll be potentially past his peak at that point. He's very clearly still, by some distance, the best player in the team. But do you think Ruben Amorim coming in now and looking at the future that is available from that player might already be thinking that it wouldn't be wise to build a team around his current best player?
Yes, and I think that is actually where this formation is useful, because obviously when it's a 4-2-3-1, that number 10 role is so pivotal to making the team connect and creating chances, whereas here you've actually he's got shares the responsibility with the guy alongside him if that combination is the right balance. So I feel like he's clearly going to be a very useful player for Ruben Amorim. Even against Ipswich, he probably didn't have a very good game by his standards, his historical standards, but he still was the one creating the most, key passes. He was involved in the goal that they scored, really cute inside pass to Ahmad that clearly was something off the training ground as well, where you've got the wing back pushing on and Fernandes dropping out to the wing. So yeah, I think he'll certainly utilise him. And also he signed a big contract at the start of this year, so he is locked in for a good few years yet.
Okay, so you think he will be there?
Yes.
But when you look forward to imagining a hypothetical scenario where Man United are challenging to win the Premier League in maybe 2, more likely 4, maybe longer years' time.
So optimistic, Joe.
He's not part of that team, is he? Because by then he'll be very old.
Yes, I suppose so, yeah. The only way you could see him being part of that team is if he's a, substitute that kind of comes on in specific circumstances or is kept around for that kind of, that winning mentality. I know you are right, JJ. United have lost a lot in the last few years. They've won a couple of trophies, shall we say? So maybe he's got that fabric, that kind of want to win at least.
I think he is desperate to win.
Yes.
He certainly looks it. But 19.7% of people don't think he should be there in 2 years' time, which was a number. Maybe that's what would be at all fan bases, but that kind of surprised me a little bit. That's a little higher than I thought it would be. Okay, let's move on to the final section here. Now, this is another grouping, Laurie. It's made up of Marcus Rashford and Joshua Xerxes, two players who I think might be controversial among the fans. I'm going to hold on to my fan data until after you've spoken, but I think you can imagine what it might look like. Let's start with Marcus Rashford. Amorim, obviously, he played him in the number 9 position in the first game against Ipswich. And worth saying that we're recording this before they play Bodo Glimt in the Europa League. What do you think the future looks like for Marcus Rashford? Do you still think that in 2 years' time he can be a key central part of the team, or do you think he would even be here in 2 years' time?
It's a really fascinating debate around Marcus Rashford, because there is a school of thought that says he is a saleable asset right now, and if he doesn't look like he's particularly happy in certain roles, and he was smiling today at training, by the way, I must admit that, but he does on the pitch sometimes come across like he's not fully engaged, or because he's obviously such a talented player and he scored against Ipswich, right? But then still at the end of it, you've got a lot of criticism from fans, and so I do wonder if they look at it and go, okay, let's come to an agreement where you can go and flourish maybe somewhere else. We get a decent chunk of money. The only issue is again sort of salary, when you come down to realities of it, who can afford
Yeah.
the kind of salary that he would want. But yeah, I mean, the number 9 role was an interesting one for him to pick straight away. I think Amorim has said since that game that that's not the ideal role for Rashford. I think we can all appreciate that, because that kind of physicality needed, back to play, being able to hold the ball up and bring others into play, that's just not Rashford's game. So
Was it just because he wasn't on international duty?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah, because he had him for a whole week, so he was, and we saw the training footage from United that was released. Amorim clearly had a say in the kind of clips that were released. We could see Rashford up top, and Rasmus Højlund was away with Denmark, so I imagine that he starts in the next game.
So yes or no, 2 years' time, what do you think?
I think he will still be at the club, because I think United find it very difficult to sell players. Whether he should be or not, I think is a different question.
And what if I were to ask you that question?
Very sharp of you there, Joe, to ask me that question. I think he probably should go, actually, at that point. I feel like the trajectory of him, I think he could maybe flourish somewhere else.
Oh, what do you think?
I think what Laurie thinks.
Yeah, very fair, very safe. I also think what Laurie thinks. That's right. He said it. 58.6% of the people surveyed responded and said the same. They also either expect Marcus Rashford not to be there in 2 years' time, or think that he shouldn't be. That could be to do with his age. Again, we think he might be, potentially a little bit past his peak age in 2 years' time. But who could possibly read into the mind of Manchester United football fans? Impossible to know. Joshua Zirkzee, on the other hand, it's a bit clearer what the fans think. 71.7% of them think that he won't be or shouldn't be here in 2 years' time. He's not had the greatest start to his Manchester United career. I do have some sympathy for him as well, though, Laurie. What do you think?
Why is your sympathy there, Joe?
Because it's a very difficult situation.
I'm pinning you now.
And because my personal opinion, as valueless as it is that when I watched him play, I thought he's got a pretty good weight of pass, and I think he's got a good touch, and I certainly didn't watch him and think, this guy's rubbish.
I think, I agree. He's clearly very technical, and he has an ability to, move around the pitch in a unique way, shall we say. But the issue is his goal scoring. I mean, he actually scored on his debut, didn't he? He came on as a substitute, stuck his foot out, got the ball in the back of the net.
So did Federico Macheda.
Well, I think he would actually rank quite highly in United fans' opinions, even though he kind of didn't really last much longer after that. Whereas Joshua Zirkzee has, it feels like, already, as the stats are telling us, is on the other side of their thoughts. I also wonder if the United recruiters are absolutely happy at what the deal they did there in the summer, because what United needed was a guaranteed goal scorer, and he's just not that. He scored I think 11 goals in Serie A last season, and so to come into the Premier League and expect him to repeat those kind of numbers, it just doesn't feel right. And I think it's more that he doesn't seem like he's got that killer instinct. It was kind of ironic because that's what Ten Hag said about him sort of getting his foot on the end of the cross for his first goal, but he hasn't really shown that in other games, and I do wonder how he fits into this system. Yeah,
okay, fine. I mean, I wondered, JJ, if you think he'll go the way of Anthony, for whom 91.9% of people think he will not be there.
I remember Anthony, but I also remember Joshua Zirkzee, who isn't gone yet. He's still there. And one of the interesting things about him is that...
Before you tell me that, let's hear from Phil Hay with something just a little bit interesting.
Jake Paul's boxing bout with Mike Tyson showed how the face of sport is changing. And we're about to see something similar with football, with the expansion of the Baller League. It's a 6-on-6 tournament, founded in Germany, with quirky rules and a fair amount of razzmatazz. It's a bit like Gerard Piqué's Kings League in Spain, and it's coming to the US and the UK pretty soon. YouTube stars are behind the concept, and they've got other famous people involved to manage the teams, like Alan Shearer, Micah Richards and Robert Perez. It won't be everybody's cup of tea, but I bet he grows legs fast. Have a great weekend, and sign up to the Athletic FC newsletter using the link below.
Thanks, Phil.
If you're building an elite level squad, there's a way you can make it up to make it really good. And the way I think you make it up is you have 30% of your squad are young players, so 18 to 23, it's my bracket for young, even though 23 does feel old now. 50% of them should be in their peak age, at their very best, and they are 24 to 29 years old. Because as you know, once you hit 30, you're done now. So that's experience that counts as 20%. And obviously it's a big bracket, and players can play a bit longer and later, but some of them will be cooked by the time they're 28, 29, some of them won't be, so that's what happens. But what you have currently is the Man United squad has a bunch of players who fit into this exact grouping, so I've put them there. And one of the players who will be in their peak age and therefore should be one of the key players in Man United in 2 years' time, based on this, is our friend Joshua Zirkzee.
He'll be aging into peak.
He'll be 25, so he'll be like peak when you should really be affecting games and changing things. But there's a couple of things, exactly what Laurie's saying. I don't know where he fits in, because other players will be better than him at this. He doesn't really offer exactly what you want as a striker. Maybe he'll develop into something, and that's where you need training sessions, individual work to try and turn him into that sort of player. I don't know if I see it at the moment, but then I've been wrong before, and by Lord, I'll be wrong again. But this is the thing with this squad makeup of Man United in 2 years' time, if we're saying what they will look like. They're going to lose Evans and Heaton probably, because they're both getting on a wee bit. So you lose experience there. You need to gain it from elsewhere. That's why I think Shaw will stick around and players like that. But then your key players, these are your key players for Man United. Is this good enough? Xerxes, Antony, Ahmad, Mount, Rashford's just on the edge of it. He'll be 29. Ugart, Mazraoui, Dalot. That's not a team that's competing for the Champions League.
Those will be the peak age players.
Yeah, so that's what you get. You got young players coming through, and I'm sure they'll supplement that with new ones that come through. And there's a few in the academy that are quite decent, but they have spent so much money already to end up with a team that in 2 years' time will need to be completely refreshed again. It's unideal.
I mean, that's the kind of scary thing about this, I suppose, looking forwards, Laurie, is that we saw the reaction to Lenny Yora being brought in the summer was delight from Manchester United fans that the club were finally signing exciting young players, 19 years old. But from what JJ's saying, it seems like if they don't sign additional peak age players who maybe are above the quality of the players aging into that they have now, they're not going anywhere. I mean, what does that make you feel thinking forwards to the future transfer windows?
Yeah, I think that the new football executive came in with an agenda to reduce the age of the squad, and they felt that, for example, Casemiro had been signed for a lot of money with no resale value and kind of past his peak. He's actually been kind of useful, certainly in Erik ten Hag's first season, but their view was to, buy young, hungry, to JJ's initial point, players who could improve at the club and also wouldn't cost, excessive amounts of money. So Joshua Zirkzee came in with a release clause, so, 40 million, something like that. They saw that as a potentially good value for a striker that they viewed as a very promising prospect in Europe. But yeah, I agree that I think they need to sign some players that they know are guarantees in the Premier League. I think they've gone to the continent, looked abroad, and that's always a great way to perhaps get that lower cost in there. But I think there's also a lot to be said for players that they know are going to hit the ground running in the Premier League.
Well, we're going to come back to talk about what positions on the pitch you think they might be targeting either in January or in the summer. Before we do that though, let's just finish up with the squad audit. JJ, tell me about the rest of the players briefly that we didn't talk about there.
I feel like these ones are obvious, but I think players like Garnacho are kind of interesting because he's really a winger, I think, maybe an inside forward, but there's maybe not a space for him every single time. You want someone who's a bit more technical on the ball. I actually think he should be there in 2 years' time because he'll develop into something. He's really young, he's 20 now, 22 obviously in 2 years' time. Either going to be a really high-level squad player or he has a potential ceiling to go into be a really, really good player. So he's got to be there. Okay. I think Højlund's interesting because I think we can all see what he needs to work on in his game, but he was getting absolutely nothing, no help from other players around him under Ten Hag, as most of the players on the pitch did. So once he gets a system around him that supports him, you'll probably see much more, and we'll probably see him playing a bit more like what Liam Delap was like in the Ipswich game. Getting the ball, receiving, shielding, dropping, running in behind, doing all the things off the ball that you need. I think he's got that in him, so he should be there as well. I think Manuel Ugarte will prove to be really valuable because he was so important to Amorim when he was at Sporting. He's a kind of ball winner. He's very mobile and will cover those spaces that you need. And so those are the kind of ones I think are maybe controversial, but I would keep them. The rest, honestly, I would sell all of them.
Okay, looking forward to January or perhaps more likely the summer. Do you know which areas on the pitch the club are targeting in the transfer market?
Yeah, I think that centre forward is one that they need to supplement and that they will look at because it hasn't quite hit the mark with Joshua Zirkzee. Rasmus Højlund they do want to improve, but equally they need a guarantee of goals, I think. And also the wing backs. I think Amorim's come into a squad that wasn't assembled for a back three. He needs to have players that are dedicated to that wing back role that can get forward, but also have the defensive diligence as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you think it's more likely the summer though? Or January maybe?
I just think that they haven't got the money for January. They are very tight, according to them, on financial fair play regulations. Ruben Amorim has spoken about wanting to work with the squad they've already got, so I think all the tension is on the summer market.
Well, even if they're not looking at it in January, we will be. Join JJ Bull on what will, I assume, be a good episode of the Sensible Transfers, where we look at the specific players that should come in and into those positions that Laurie said there.
Even though they can't afford them.
Well, yeah, that won't happen, but
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.